Lessons learned from the 2017 election. Joining us on Columbus on the Record this week, Kathy Kandinsky, State House reporter for the Columbus Dispatch, Andy Chow, State House reporter for Ohio Public Radio, Herb Asher, OSU political scientist, and Marianne Sharkey, public affairs consultant. Drug companies spent at least $60 million to defeat Issue 2, the so-called Drug Price Relief Act. Based on the margin of victory, it looks like they could have saved some of that money. Voters, by a more than 3-to-1 margin, rejected the proposal to cap state drug purchases at VA prices. Whether it was bad law, big money, or voter confusion, Issue 2 was not close.
What sounds too good to be true usually is. Indeed, Issue 2 was wrong for patients, wrong for taxpayers. Issue 2 would not have lowered drug prices or saved the state money, as proponents repeatedly promised, without any foundation.
The voters have spoken tonight. What we have learned is that $75 million can convince people to vote against their own best interest.
Was it bad law, big money, or voter confusion that doomed this question?
I think it was a little bit of all three, but mostly it was the money in this race. I mean, when they started out on this issue, the people that were for it, early polling showed it was overwhelmingly people were in favor of this. The drug companies with their $60 million campaign were able to reverse that sentiment, within a year's time with the ads on TV that we all saw. They just created they sowed a lot of confusion about the issue. People weren't sure if it was a good idea or not a good idea. And they ultimately convinced people to vote in favor of big drug companies. Pretty surprising.
Yeah. Herb, you've been involved in these petitions before. Did it have to be that complicated? Did they have to have the legal requirement and paying for the lawyers as a part of it, or could they just kept it simple and had a better shot?
Well, they certainly could have kept it simpler. That not every issue has to be resolved on the ballot, so that was sort of silly. But I would give, certainly the money was very important, but I thought they used the money wisely in many cases, and they put together this coalition. The coalition included military, it included doctors. Every major group in Ohio came out against it. And then they put that on the television ads. And I think for a lot of voters who don't know about it, said, oh my gosh, if the nurses and the doctors and everybody else is against it, it must not be a good idea. But I think we say when there is confusion, though, when in doubt, vote no.
Yeah, that's been the history of Ohio.
Yeah.
Is when people and they confuse people. You're right, with this coalition that they put together. Of course, as a former reporter, and I think a reporter should start looking at all these building funds and for veterans and et cetera, because I'd like to know how much money went directly into these organizations.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to figure out exactly why it lost by so much, though. Yeah, there was a lot of money going into it, and obviously the messaging was working, but I'm just still surprised that it worked that well, that 80% of the people came out to vote against it. It was a huge margin.
Landslide.
So what did the supporters of Issue 2 do wrong? I mean, they basically kept beating that there was the greedy drug companies don't want this, so you should want it.
Well, they needed to show some savings, real savings. I mean, they needed to show that this was actually impact people's drug costs, and I think they failed to do that.
Yeah.
There was confusion over how much it was going to save, and there was also confusion on whether it would actually work, because I think the opponents of the bill did a really good job, the opponents of the issue did a really good job of questioning whether VA prices were even going to be available so that the law or the proposed issue could be implemented. I think they did a good job of that, and I think the supporters just didn't combat it. They did have some good ads, though. I mean, I thought their David and Goliath ad was really good. I thought the other ad they had questioning, are you going to side with the drug companies? I mean, I thought they had some good ads, and they spent some money too.
They had at least $14 to $15 million, which on a normal campaign is about average.
Yeah, but even though they had some good ads, you weren't seeing them nearly as much as all the No on Issue 2 ads that we were seeing constantly.
But they needed to frame the issue and dominate the issue by saying, do you like the big drug companies or not? And they lost that, I mean, because with all the other noise and confusion out there.
Well, the medical establishment, as Herb mentioned, the coalition of the medical establishment was opposed to this. But you could say their vested interest is in keeping the status quo. Could supporters have gone after hospitals and overall medical cost, or would that have backfired?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think if you could have offset a little bit with the hospitals, if they were willing to do it. But I mean, really, the impact was on people who get, Medicaid benefits. It wasn't really going to have that much of an impact on people who just are, Medicaid people, or Medicare people and people who are private pay. So, but I think, again, they had to show people that this would really save them dollars and cents. Jim Rhodes used to always say, put the wallet down, what goes in and what goes out. That's what really matters to people.
Saving the government money isn't enough to get some of the
That's right.
Yeah, they weren't only not able to show us how much money they could save the government, they weren't able to really prove that it won't raise the cost for
other
2/3 of Ohioans.
Yeah, exactly.
$60 million, but they won by a huge amount, Herb. Why? They were trying to run up the score, were they not, to tell other states, don't try this? They didn't have to spend all that money here.
I think early on they felt they did. And they saw in other states, especially California, which is a very different kind of state, it was a very closely fought battle. They won there, but only by about the 53-47. And when you have a lot of money, what do? You spend it.
And you buy a lot of consultants. At the same thing. The consultants were the real winners.
Yeah. Well, the consultants and the TV stations.
The TV stations, right.
Commercial.
I'm sorry, we apologize.
No, that's
We have
right.
plenty to talk about.
That's
We're going to get the ads.
NPR did not get the ads.
We love the fact that so many of our friends, our Democratic friends, wound up on both sides of the issue.
Right.
Our Republican friends wound up on both sides of the issue. It was the Full Employment Act for consultants.
But if you're, Dennis Willard mentioned that South Dakota or North Dakota, one of the Dakotas, is looking at putting this on the ballot, D.C. maybe. But when you look at this result, and you're Michael Weinstein, are you going to invest in this when you see it get trounced this badly?
I think he's going to, and I think the big lesson that he might take away from this, and the people who want this issue to succeed might take away from this, is they took a plan that they built for California, and it lost by about 6 points in California. Then they brought it here, and according to a lot of people, did not change it to be customized towards Ohio, and they lost by 80% of the vote. So I think the next plan is to, when you go to South Dakota and Washington, D.C., really get connected with those groups, just like all the groups that came out in Ohio against it, connect with those groups and see if they can get some buy-in.
Get local folks to run
Right.
the show. I mean, truly local organizations.
Yeah, and
not just local
customize it a
operatives,
little bit.
All right, the margin for victory for the other statewide issue was even wider than the drug price question. Voters overwhelmingly approved issue 1, the Crime Victims' Rights Amendment. It won by better than a 4-to-1 margin. The amendment requires prosecutors to keep victims and their families up to date on court proceedings. It also gives victims standing to intervene in cases, and the ACLU is already talking about challenging this amendment in court. Andy Chow, this is a case where the money, there was problems with this amendment that opponents could have taken advantage of, but the money was on the other side, was on the yes side here.
The money was on this side and the messaging was on their side too. Not a lot of people wanted to really strongly come out against and say that they are against crime victim rights. So I think it was an easy sell for the yes on issue 1 people to say, this is what we want to accomplish. We want more rights for victims, and that's what we want to do. So there were 2 groups, the Prosecuting Attorneys Association, the Public Defender. They were coming out against it, but there was no money to put behind it, and really, I don't know what kind of message that they could have really centered around.
Any surprise here? I mean, you can't, it's pretty simple, voting with crime victims, even though that it might have some unforeseen consequences.
The arguments you would have made against it would have been sort of constitutional, jurisprudential. They'd be
all those buzzwords.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And again, who could be against crime victims? And then, of course, when they had the
Kelsey Grammer. Kelsey Grammer had a killer ad.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think a lot of people were swayed. I mean, tragedy clearly hit his family, but it was in California, I assume, not in Ohio. So, and in most Ohio jurisdictions, crime victims are acknowledged, do have rights. Most prosecutors are careful. This is really more about the rural areas of the state.
But Kathy, here we have the drug prices. A guy from California couldn't get across, but here we have a guy from California and Kelsey Grammer, the billionaire who financed
There's a lot of
Marcy's
irony
law.
there. There's a lot of irony.
They sold it here.
But as others have said before, voting against victims' rights is just it's a no-winner.
Yeah. The initiative petition. Is there any lessons we can learn here that with these 2, got one big, one lost big? Is it going to change how people approach these efforts in the future?
As long as people have money and see whether it's an ideological or an economic interest, they're going to pursue that. Ohio allows that. The Constitutional Modernization Commission, which ended its business a little early, but was trying to actually come up with proposals that would make it more attractive for people to go the initiated statute law route than going the constitutional amendment route, because people felt that certain things should not be in a constitution, and once it's in a constitution, it's hard to change. But if it were a statute, it could be modified down the road. But then a lot of people would say, well, if you can modify an initiated statute, can't the legislature next year say, oh, you won, but you lost?
Yeah.
And so they were putting in some proposals to protect that initiated statute for 5 years, but it's going to continue.
One way they're trying to look at it is to outlaw paid circulators. I'm not sure that would hold up constitutionally. I think you probably have a right to, pay people to circulate petitions.
To collect the signatures, to get
collect
it on
the
the ballot.
signatures
Yeah.
to put it on the ballot.
And other people are now suggesting, and I think Representative Donnie is talking about increasing the percentage of the votes you need in order for a proposal to pass. And my guess is if that has to go to the Constitution, it'll be pretty easy to defeat, because you'll say, what? 51% doesn't win?
Right.
Yeah.
It's not gonna-
Yeah, I think the thing that we're seeing with these ballot issues too is it's so expensive to get something on the ballot that the people who do shell out that money make sure that they write something in for themselves so it benefits them in a way, and then it kind of comes back to hurt them. We didn't really see it that much this time around, but that's what we've been seeing in other issues.
Next year, we're going to have on the ballot, I hope, a redistricting proposal in which all the signatures are being collected by volunteers, and there will not be big money behind it, but ideally they'll be successful. It really is the noble use of this process.
But the more difficult path.
Yes.
A much more difficult path.
Columbus voters like things at City Hall just the way they are. All three Democratic incumbents, Mitchell Brown, Shannon Hardin, and Priscilla Tyson, all won re-election fairly easily. Herb Asher, no surprise. The establishment Democrats, because there were other Democrats on the ballot, the establishment Democrats won easily.
Yes, they did, and probably one reason why they won easily is that Columbus is doing well. I mean, the progressive group had criticisms of this and that, and some of the criticisms are certainly very valid, but if you ask, how is the city of Columbus doing? It's prospering, it's economically fine, people are optimistic. So what is the argument for change? And I don't think there was a very good argument here. And the Franklin County Party also did a very good job. They weren't taking any chances. They finally got their act together. And so they got all of the calls made, not robocalls, but actually person-to-person calls, making sure people voted. There was a ton of mailings and all of that. So my guess is that they took this seriously. Because I think they felt that if this other group, Yes We Can, had even one success right now, that would in fact change the tone of the debate in the community. Nevertheless, there still are issues on the agenda, including, do we have the optimal structure for Columbus City Council, for example? That issue is still being discussed.
Kelly, there are neighborhoods that don't feel like they're enjoying the success that
Right.
other neighborhoods that downtown, the Short North, are feeling. But this group couldn't get the turnout, couldn't motivate those folks to get out and vote.
No,
If there truly are serious concerns in places like Linden or the Hilltop.
Well, I think there are serious concerns in those areas, but they're not organized enough to get a candidate onto the ballot, not to get a successful candidate onto the ballot at this point.
Marianne, you worked up in the Cleveland election. They
Right.
did see some change up there. What's the difference between here and there? What's the big difference, do you see?
Well, we all, they're all Democrats, first of all, in Cleveland. So you have Democrats versus Democrats. But we did lose three incumbents this year, which is very unusual. Part of it is crime. I mean, the big issue on the ballot for a lot of voters was crime. Even though Mayor Jackson won 60-40, there were about three incumbents who lost based on the crime issue.
Yeah. And you still have wards up in Cleveland.
Yeah, we do have wards.
Well, we
up
have
in
at-large elections here.
Right. Each ward is about 22,000 people in each ward.
I think the thing is also it's just an off year, so you're going to have low voter turnout anyway. So if you're going to try to unseat an incumbent in an off year, it's going to be a tough hill to climb.
Yeah.
Just an uphill battle.
And like Herb said, things are going fairly smoothly. There has been no real scandal. The red flag scandal was in the past now. They've moved past that. So.
Right.
It can be dangerous to overanalyze off-year elections. They occur in just a couple of states, but let's do it anyway. Tuesday was a good night for Democrats, maybe Not all that surprising, but a good night nonetheless. Candidates for governor won big in New Virginia and in New Jersey. The wins in those blue states were expected, but the margins of victory and the higher than expected turnout boosted Democrats' spirits.
Virginia has told us to end the divisiveness, that we will not condone hatred and bigotry, and to end the politics that have torn this country apart.
Tonight, we declare the days of division are over. We will move forward together. This is exactly who we are, New Jersey. We have each other's backs.
Herb Asher, Democrats won in 2 states where Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump just last year. What's the big deal?
Virginia's a very big deal because Virginia, you called it a blue state. It actually is still more, it's a purple to blue state. Ed Gillespie ran a couple of years ago and almost won. So I think what's significant here is the Democrats actually got a good candidate in Northam, who in fact ran a good campaign, did not feel he had to move so far to the left that actually some very liberal Democrats bailed out on him. And I think what they did is they tapped into, though, the anger that's out there among many, many people, not just among Democrats, but and not just among women, but people in the suburbs, that there's something wrong. And Northam was not a candidate who scared people off. He was saying the right things, and then toward the end of the campaign, that would have been Gillespie also, but then toward the end of the campaign, Gillespie starts sort of the scare ads, and that sort of feeds into that he really is trying to sort of replicate Trump, but without Trump being there. And I think some Republicans, conservative, are saying, "Oh, we lost because we haven't had successes in Congress, and you have to get your bills passed." That's not why you lost. You lost, and you lost throughout the country in local races too, because I think a lot of people are worried about what are you really for. Now, for the Democrats, they have to start answering the question. You can't simply be anti-Trump. What are you for? Who are you for?
Kathy, that if you look at the other races that have happened between last November 2016 to this November, and the Republicans have won the congressional race in Georgia. I'm thinking there was concern that the Democrat motivation wasn't there, but I think Virginia especially showed that Democrats are willing to turn out to vote against a Republican against Donald Trump.
I think in huge ways. I mean, the women vote in particular, the suburban vote, as you mentioned in particular, they had great turnout. And if they can replicate that, and more importantly, it's lifting their spirits. So if they can start replicating that, they see a path forward now and can start replicating that in other states, I think they have a chance of seeing a lot more success in next year's midterm.
Marianne, do we see women candidates? I'm thinking about the 3 women running for governor on the Democratic side, in particular. Are they emboldened now to say to Democratic voters, look at this, as women have done well? And also, does it bring more candidates out of the woodwork to maybe run for Congress? Challenge Steve Stivers, run for Pat Tiberi's seat?
Well, I think there's no question that women have been energized, and I think gun control is part of the reason women have been energized. They're also energized about health care. That's a huge issue with most women. And now this whole tax reform package is concerning people, certainly about college affordability, about medical deductions, about mortgage deductions. So I think all of these various issues, are truly energizing women. It's not just about, being able to, have a gun or concealed carry anymore. It's becoming really concerning issues for women.
And then on top of that, you have all the sexual harassment things coming out at this time right now.
You're feeling empowered.
We were seeing in Virginia and New Jersey that the exit polls are showing that people made their decision based on how much they dislike President Trump. And I wonder what that's going to do for a lot of the Republicans who are running for governor in Ohio. There are some who are kind of trying to attach themselves to that Trump brand, some who are kind of keeping their distance. I wonder how the Trump effect will play out in Ohio.
Well, Marianne, does Jim Renacci and Mary Taylor, both running for governor, do they put the brakes on their support of Trump? Josh Mandel is all in on Donald Trump. I don't think he's going backwards, but
I don't see Renacci. I think he's all in too. I don't see Renacci backing off. I can certainly see DeWine and Husted, who have always sort of steered a middle course anyway. They're more moderate Republicans. They're also well-known entities. I don't really see them, embracing or running from Trump. I just think they're going to run on their own.
They need to find a way to stop alienating or antagonizing women voters. minority voters. I mean, that's the biggest, I mean, that's the problem they're having in my view right now.
Herb, which Democrat is most encouraged? Democrat running for governor, which is most emboldened by results from this week? Is any of them?
Maybe Connie Pillage, only because of her resume, to have been in the military, you know, that sort of thing, to have demonstrated some good fundraising capability already. But I think every Democrat has been emboldened by these results.
Does Richard Cordray have third thoughts? I don't know what thought he's on now to maybe jump into the race now, and he sees that.
Well, he's got poor Justice O'Neill hanging out there.
He's holding his seat.
The only elected Democrat statewide office is sitting there, still on the court, but not able to take in new cases, which is one of the weirdest situations I've seen.
Yes.
You know.
So.
I think all Democrats will be emboldened, but I don't know if this means Cordray is going to jump in. I mean, it seems to me just based on his actions so far, he's really not interested.
And I think the question is, does the Ohio Democratic Party have the organization around itself that people in Virginia and New Jersey did? Because I think lately it's been a little weaker, and we don't know if they can really rally people throughout the whole state like they used to.
All right. Our last topic, the list of men accused of admitting to or being accused of sexual harassment continues to grow. It's brought down high-profile media and movie executives, actors, and state lawmakers. The House Speaker in Kentucky resigned after a cover-up. Here in Ohio, State Rep Cliff Height of Findlay quit after making repeated sexual advances toward a staff member. This week, 35 women who work at the State House, including 13 lawmakers, called for more action to end sexual harassment there. Mary Ann Sharkey, how bad a situation is it at the State House? Do we expect more women and perhaps men to come forward and say there have been inappropriate things going on?
Well, I mean, this really saddens me a lot because, you know, I was at the State House in the 80s, and a lot of this was rampant at the time. And I felt that, you know, it was being addressed, and we had more and more women coming into office. There are 22 women now, I think, in the General Assembly. And we had more and more women coming into the media. And at the time when I first got there, women were very rare, and it really was, you know, even the State House press room had girly pinups all over the.
Wow.
I mean, the atmosphere was really like a locker room when I first got there. And I had thought that we had moved past this. I'm very sad that we have not moved past this, but I am glad to see the crackdown beginning.
They've called for training for lawmakers, sexual harassment training, but these women here are saying that's not enough. It has to be a culture change.
It does have to be a culture change. What's changed now is the Harvey Weinstein was a real tipping point. And so women who were not, or who perhaps reluctant to come forward before, now feel that it's their time to come forward and kind of air some of these issues. And I expect that the leadership is going to respond. I'm not sure what beyond the training they're talking about they might do, but I think that, I mean, they have no choice. They need to respond to this. Look what's happening.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's enough. So they're going to start doing training, but something that House Speaker Rosenberger talked about was trying to encourage victims to come out and be able to feel comfortable in reporting something. So if they feel like that there's been some sort of violation, they need to be able to feel comfortable to come out and say something. I wonder if part of that culture change is making that a more welcoming environment.
It seems to be.
And I think, you know, the actions of Senate President Ophoff in very quickly addressing the Height situation demonstrated, I think, to a lot of other leaders that you're much better off taking care of the issue up front than trying to sweep it under the rug. So even if the culture doesn't change, I think people will understand that the politics of this is you better get it out there now because it's likely to come out anyway, and if you can get it out quickly and demonstrate that you're on top of it, that's really the key thing.
Mary, you've worked in both media and politics. Why are those two? Is it just coincidence that they're the top of the list now as far as these complaints, or are these two industries prone to this?
I can't really answer that. I do know in both industries it is rampant. It is it is a real hard situation. I know in talking to a lot of women, I know that, I mean, I'm on Facebook and, I told about my own situation, and I was inundated with women who have worked in the media who've told me all kinds of supervisors, editors, other reporters, situations they've gone through. Wow. So yes, it is rampant, and it's sad, and it has to be stopped.
Okay, let's get to our off-the-record parting shots, and Marianne Sharkey, we'll start with you.
Well, speaking of contenders for governor, I would say Dennis Kucinich is a wild card, but I think he's going to probably jump into the Democratic race.
Interesting. Herb?
The results of this past Tuesday suggest to the Democratic Party, get candidates in every district, and particularly in our area right here, try to get a credible candidate to run in the 12th district with the seat that Pat Tiberi is vacating.
Even though it's gerrymandered.
Even though it's gerrymandered and it's not likely that you can win it, but if the Republicans have a very divisive primary and they nominate somebody from the extreme right fringe of the party, a reasonable Democrat might have a chance.
You never know when a scandal
Yeah.
comes out.
Thank you.
Andy?
We're talking about Justice Bill O'Neill, who's running for governor. A lot of Republicans have been saying that he needs to leave the Supreme Court if he wants to run for a partisan office. Now there's a lawmaker, Representative Niraj Antani, who is invoking an article in the state constitution that's summoning O'Neill to a joint session of the legislature to call him out and possibly start working towards removing him from the bench.
Oh my.
Interesting. Kathy?
Well, I was interested in that vote in Maine where Maine voters voted to expand Medicaid. I thought that was interesting. They hadn't gotten done in the legislature. I expect to see that on ballots all across the country in states where there is not Medicaid expansion. I think Obamacare supporters might find that to be a successful route for them to take.
Okay. My colleague Debbie Holmes this week did a story on the 50th anniversary of the Hollywood Casino on the West Side, and the casino has failed to live up to expectations on jobs. It's also failed to produce the crime that opponents had promised when the casino was established, so it failed to meet expectations on 2 counts. That's Columbus on the Record for this week. Check us out online, Facebook, Twitter, and our website, WOSU.org. Have a good week.